on that, let's say stock market, like what was happened on day 5, like day like previous -5, day -5, day -4, day -3, 2, 1. So these information I already have. What is the trend is going on? Let's say that's $50 was the share market. Now it's 51. Now it's 52. So based on these sequential data, you can get some idea of where this stock is going. But only this sequential update or some sort of incremental update to the stock price is not will say that on current day or the next day it will also go up. These market fluctuation has lot of to do with the external world information, how like Tesla is managing, what are the different thing that Tesla is proposing, of how what people are thinking about this, what is the standard general perception about the company in people's mind. So that's where you can get an idea that perhaps the price will go up. So you need to predict the price. If lots of out of 1,000 tweets, let's out of 1,000 tweets, 800 tweets are very, very positives. And the current stock market price is something like that. Previous 5 days is 50, 51, 52, let's say 53, something like this. Now, can you predict what the price will be for the next few days? Probably today or tomorrow or day after tomorrow, something like that, based on these reviews. So it gives you a sense that most, like majority of the people are still finding this Tesla is going good, then perhaps the valuation of that company will, stock will also go up. So you need to predict that. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So yeah, so these are the different domains that you can apply sentiment to. Now going forward to the sentiment analysis as a formal definition, right? So what is the formal definition we can have for this? So as we mentioned, we're dealing with text. So you will have some document D. So let's say this is your document. And these are the different things that you are seeing as a highlight, the sentiment and the product. So good product means it's a positive thing, right? But the question you can ask further as a researcher is these 4 questions, these 4 fundamental question arises. So first is that given a document, what is the sentiment of that document? Okay, this is positive. Of given a sentence, what is the sentiment of that a sentence? So that's positive. Now another question is who hold this sentiment, right? I can say that my brother thinks Apple is a very good company, or my brother thinks Tesla is a bad company. Now, who holds this sentiment? Whether the person who is writing this or the person I'm mentioning, my brother is holding that sentiment. So it's also important to know that who holds this sentiment. In general, like majority of the cases, the writer himself or herself are treated as this, the writer of this or the sentiment holder, right? Another question you can ask about what? Okay, this sentiment is good, but about what? So if I give you this good product, you can say it's a positive sentence, right? The first sentence, good product, is positive. But what is good for what thing? What is the entity? So product is there is some product, which is the entity. So in the second sentence itself, you can see that value for money, phone. So from this sentence, you can see that, okay, this is a positive sentence. But at the same time, you also have to find positive about what. So positive, the target or the entity is phone. So that's you also need to identify. And third is that you also need to know when. So sentiment again is not time bound, like it can differ from like different days. Like as I mentioned, like in the previous example with Tesla, right? People are writing good thing about Tesla, but suddenly something bad happened with Elon Musk or some, let's say Tesla company, right? So people start criticizing the same company, which they are trusting. So now their sentiment has changed. So time is also a factor here, right? So these 4 fundamental questions are always associated with sentiment analysis in a general. Like this is a very standard definition I'm using. Okay. So we can say that the sentiment analysis can be expressed as mathematically as like formally as quintuple, where there's a document which is used to be analyzed. What is the sentiment, whether it's a positive, whether it's negative, who hold the sentiment, what is the target entity and when the sentiment was made. Right? And you can see that within this document, we can have different granularity of the documents. I can ask you to find sentiment of the complete document. And when I say the document, it means number of sentences, n number of sentences. Okay. I can ask you, okay, what is the sentiment of each paragraph in that document? What is the sentiment of each sentence in that paragraph? And similarly, what is the sentiment of the phrase in that sentence? That's also a possible. So based on the granularity of the document, you can have different sentiment analysis model. Right? And the complexity are also like you can find some pros and cons with that, but it is normally better to do any kind of analysis at the fine-grained level. It's better because you get more information. Okay? So if you get only like this document is positive, but if this document is, let's say, 1,000 sentences long, so it is very unlikely that all these 1,000 sentences are positive. All of them are expressing positive sentiment. Perhaps 500 of those are like expressing positive, but remaining 500 are either negative or neutral or something mixture of that. So you have to decide a consolidated sentiment at the document level, the coarse grain level. Okay. Within sentiment, like you also have a number of different things. So you can have this categorical classification. That means whether it's positive, negative, neutral, no sentiment, or conflict, you are expressing both positive and negative in the same sentence. Okay. That's also possible. Or you can have this ordinal classification. Okay, within positive, it's a weak positive, mild positive, strong positive. That's also possible. Sentiment orientation. Or the other thing is the regression is also possible, right? We can call it intensity, sentiment intensity. Okay? So rather than as saying that strong positive, weak positive, mild positive, or simple positive, I can say, okay, positive with percentage, let's say on a scale of 0 to 1, it's 0.9. So intensity of the sentiments is 0.9. That's just quite high, right? You can relate this strong positive to somewhere 0.7 to 1.0, something like that. So this range is not well defined. So you can have anything. So that's the intensity as a regression problem is also possible. Again, sentiment holder, we already discussed it, usually the author. Target can be anything. It can be product, it can be service, topic, person, organization, take n number of different things. It totally depends on what application, like in which domain you are trying to find this sentiment analysis. All right. Yeah, any question?
What about the time?
So time that I also like mentioned. So it's quite possible I can have the same sentiment, different sentiment over a period of time, right? Regarding the same thing. Let's say I bought iPhone, right? I bought an iPhone today, right? So today I'm very excited to have new phone. So perhaps my sentiment is very, very positive toward that, right? But after, let's say, 2 months of use, after 2 months of use. Now regarding the same target, I'm having different opinion. I'm having different sentiment, perhaps because of some issue with the phone, perhaps. Right? So sentiment time is also a crucial. You express positive about this iPhone, let's say in August. Now in October or November, you are expressing negative sentiment. So that's why sentiment time is also crucial. Like for the application perspective and the application, it is actually crucial point. But in general, we don't consider the sentiment time in research. So we only, most often than not, we concern about 3 things basically. So first is this document, that's it. Input to your system, what output you want, and what is the target entity. These are the 3 entities that you usually consider while researching on the sentiment analysis as a problem. But for an end-to-end application, you need to find who holds this sentiment. And there's some work, definitely there's some work where the sentiment holder is also, it was considered. They find that who holds this sentiment. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Just like an ad, if it's not relevant, it's fine. Like say a political party will have different support at different points in time. So will that become like a time series prediction in sentiment time or something?
So no, so this first one, this is not time series prediction, right? It's not time series prediction. You are only interested at current moment, what is the sentiment? And you can definitely extend this idea, this definition for a time series prediction. If your data allows that, that's okay. For the stock market thing, you can have the time series prediction, right? So you have stock market price for the last 100 days. Now, based on those trend, you want to predict the next thing. So that's a time series data, right? You can definitely extend that, but the standard definition does not include time per se. It only says at this point of time, the expression and the document has this particular sentiment. That's the meaning. That's the definition.
Got it. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
All right. So this is the definition, standard definition. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, that there are n number of different subproblems which comes under this sentiment analysis. So the next slide, this slide actually shows you some of those problems. Obviously, this is not exhaustive set of subproblems, but that is few problems. So first problem is very, very fundamental, and that's subjectivity. So within sentiment analysis. So the scope of sentiment is that you want to know the expression, the sentiment orientation, or the polarity orientation of the user, right? So whether he or she is expressing something or not, right? And when he or she expresses something, you want to know what's positive, negative, and neutral. That's sentiment. But it's also possible that I can write a statement without any sentiment in it, right? I do not say anything. There is no sentiment. So that problem is called subjectivity analysis, right? Whether there is a subjectivity in the evaluation of this particular text or not, right? So that's subjectivity. So in general, subjectivity you can treat as a positive, negative as a subjective class, and neutral as an objective class, right? So in this, you're not providing any expression. So this movie is 3 hours long. That's a fact. That's a statement. You're not expressing whether this is a good thing or bad thing. If you add something like that, this movie is 3 hours long and it becomes unbearable, then this becomes a negative sentiment. Then it becomes subjective expression. But if the sentence is given, this is a factual sentence. And factual sentence is called objective statements. Okay. So first class subproblem is subjectivity. Another interesting problem is thwarting. And thwarting is very interesting with respect to the end goal, end expression that you're getting is you have lots of similar kind of sentiment, either positive or negative. So in this case, lots of positivity you are telling about one particular movie, impressive story, good acting, nice song, everything. But at the end of the document, there is a very small portion, like comparatively the relatively small portion of the text is actually dictating the overall sentiment of the document. So whatever expression you had over this time, using this 2 words, you thwarted that expression. Whatever you believe or whatever like excitement you aroused in someone's mind, you just thwarted that too. It didn't meet my expectation. Right? So thwarting is small portion at the end dictates the sentiment of the document. The other problem is sarcasm. Again, very popular one, but very difficult. Believe me, it's a very, very difficult problem to handle. And even these days, there are n number of like systems available for sentiment analysis, but dealing sarcasm in an effective way, it's still an open problem. People are working on this. And what sarcasm means is that you are criticizing someone in a very humble way, very humorous way, or some other thing. Like the core component is that you are criticizing something or someone, some entity or some person, but the criticism is not very explicit. It is not very explicit. So the literal meaning of the sentence or literal meaning of the document and the surface meaning of the sentence is totally different thing, 2 different opposite ends. So you can see that this movie is awesome to put you to sleep. Right? So there's a very strong statement about awesome, right? Awesome is a very positive oriented word. So on a surface level, you can argue that the sentence is positive, right? On surface. But the literal meaning of the sentence is that this movie was so boring, so bad that you didn't have, like, you could not do anything except to sleep. Okay? That's so bad. There's no any interesting plots or something like that. So that's a sarcasm. And within sarcasm, there are a number of different problems, different issues, which is very, very difficult to find because the implicit nature of sarcasm. Okay, so if I say something to you like my neighbors are home, it's good to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? Now, how do you interpret this as a sarcasm? The sarcasm is coming because of the 3 a.m. Right? My neighbors are home, and it is good to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning. The sarcasm is just because of this a.m. Right? So there are a number of different complexity which are associated with sarcasm. Right? The opposite of sarcasm is called humble bragging. So in sarcasm, you are criticizing something. Right? In humble bragging, you are drawing attention to something which most of the people see as a positive thing, right? If some celebrity, some actor is saying, my life is miserable, I have to sign 300 autographs per day. So this gives you a sense this person is a very busy person, very, like, there are lots of fans are there. So most people see them as a positive situation, right? But the person himself is highlighting that since I have to sign 300 autographs per day, my life is not that great. So you don't think that I'm in a very good position because of this scenario. So that's called humble bragging. Other kind of sentiment analysis you can see slightly on the linguistic perspective. So this is discourse-based sentiment analysis, where you have whether lots of connectives or a lot of context when you actually find the sentiment. The movie is a classic, although I don't like sci-fi. Right? So there's some context. So this connective actually alters the overall sentiment of the sentence, right? Similarly, sense-based, it depends what is the sense of the word in that particular sentence. Remember, we talked about a word can have different sense, right? So here you can see that there are two sense for deadly. In one sense, it is saying that it's a positive sentence. In another sense, it is suggesting it's a negative sentence, right? Shane Warne is a deadly spinner. In a general cricketing sense, that's a positive sentiment. But campus has deadly snakes. In general sense, it is a negative sense. Furthermore, like I want to highlight here as well. Furthermore, you can say this is a very, like, depending on which country you support and what is your perception of that. Let's say opposition team is saying this, right? Shane Warne is a deadly spin. So perhaps you can say that the sentiment is negative in that sense. And so who holds the opinion is also matter, and it also changes the sentiment of the sentence as well, right? If in general a cricket fan is saying this, that's a positive sense. But in general, if a opposition team and very hardcore opposition fan is saying this, so perhaps this can be treated as a negative sentiment as well, right? So it's a sense-based sentiment analysis. So you have to deal with these kind of issues. Similarly, there are many words. Let's say cheap, right? So I say cheap service, that's a negative thing. But if I say cheap food, that's a positive thing, right? So this restaurant offers cheap food, that's a positive thing. This restaurant has cheap surface, that's a negative thing, right? So depending on the situation, the sense of the word will differ, and depending on that, your sentiment will also differ. Okay. And finally, there's a sentiment analysis. I already mentioned this. So movie was okay, movie was good, movie was awesome. All three are positive, but they have different sentiment towards that. Right? If most of those people are saying, okay, movie was okay, then perhaps you will also think twice before watching that movie, because there's nothing exciting about that movie. Maybe movie is okay, it's not bad, something like that. but most of the people are saying movie was awesome, then perhaps you'll intrigue to see that as soon as possible. So these kind of sub problems that comes under sentiment analysis as well. Okay.
Sir, I had a doubt.
Mhm.
So in sarcasm, for example, this movie is so awesome to put you to sleep. So where would the model get the knowledge that movies are not supposed to put you to sleep?
That's a difficult thing, right? So the model needs to understand or to comprehend the world knowledge. So in general, that's a very difficult thing to do. Somehow you have to rely on, if you can get the context, if you can get the world knowledge for the model, that's a good thing. That's the better thing. But if you don't have any context, any other thing, perhaps one linguistically phenomenon that people normally use is called incongruity. Incongruity. That means that like some conflict in the sense. So what people try to judge is that awesome is positive thing, right? And perhaps put you to sleep in some sense can be a negative sense, right? So there is an incongruity between the positive word, some of the positive words and some of the negative words in the sentence. So perhaps if the presence of both this positive and negative sentiment are there in same sense, then this may highlight that there is a sarcasm in this thing, right?
Okay, sir, fine.
So there's some linguistic feature that you need to understand, and incongruity is very powerful feature, right? Similarly, as I mentioned, that 3 a.m. Right? So nobody likes to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? Or 2 a.m. in the morning. So how this sarcasm has to move. So the model has to understand that 2 a.m. is not an ideal time to wake up in the morning. So it will see that, okay, 2 a.m. and waking up in the morning is a negative thing, but my neighbors are home and it is good to have, it is good to wake up. So good is a positive sentence. So that incongruity bit exists between 3 a.m. in the morning and good. Okay? So these kind of feature you have to exploit. Moreover, in sarcasm, text is certainly slightly unintuitive to think that the text only will give you all the information that you need. Perhaps some visual clues, some audio clues are also beneficial. So these days, there is another trend in sarcasm called multimodal sarcasm. Okay, so multimodal sarcasm sarcasm detection. So their image, their videos, their audios, their text as well. So any combination of these modalities. Now check whether something is sarcasm or not. Okay? So there is a very popular data set with respect to multimodal sarcasm that's called Mustard. And this is based on Friends data, Friends TV serial. Okay, so you have to rely on some other things. So in many cases, as I said, why it's difficult? Because it is very hard to comprehend these world knowledge. So you have to rely on other features. Okay? Like your facial expression is not that good. Like the example I shared with you, right? So it's nice to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, my neighbors are home. So nobody will say this statement in a very happy face, most likely, right? But you are still saying good as a positive word in it. So the incongruity exists between the positive sentiment in word good and the visual expression that you have as a like probably very annoyed or something like that. Got it?
Yes, sir, yes.
So these are the few examples that I have. Now I'll strictly mention the difference between sentiment and opinion, right? And in general, people term these two statements, these two terms as same. And even not only as a layman term, but as they like some of the researchers also use sentiment and opinion very interchangeably. They're very close, but they're not exactly the same thing. Okay. So let me first give you example, right? And let me ask you which statement has sentiment and which statement has opinion. So look at these four statements. It has a great camera. I love blue colored phone. I'm concerned about the current state of the economy. I think the economy is not doing well. So how many of you think that first statement is a sentiment or opinion? Anyone? What is it?
It should be an opinion.
It should be an opinion. And what is your definition of opinion?
So we are portraying something as a fact. So we are describing the camera and not how we feel about it, basically, is what I think.
No, what is fact here?
So
Great is not a
there is no
fact.
fact, but we are saying it
Yeah.
like a fact.
It's still okay. So you are saying this is opinion, right?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone think this is a sentiment?
Sir, I think it's a sentiment.
Okay, so we have this sentiment as well. And why do you think that?
Because I have seen data set
Similar.
with sentiments, so it
All right.
contains those type of.
What about the second sentence?
I mean, for the first sentence, it has a great camera. Someone is like showing his emotion, like the camera is great for him.
Again, you use the word emotion, which is different from sentiment. Okay, I'll come to that. Okay. Yeah, so for you, this is sentiment or opinion?
Sentiment.
Sentiment. Okay, so we have 2 votes for sentiment. Anyone else? No? Okay, what about the second sentence? This one. I love blue colored phone.
Opinion?
Is it opinion? Now, what's the definition for opinion for you?
Because it does not say anything about the phone. It just states that all blue colored phones would get better get better reviews from me because I just like blue colored phones.
Okay. Anyone think this is sentiment? No? All right. So the first statement is this example of sentiment. The second statement is example of opinion. And now let me differentiate these things. So opinions are very personal interpretation, very personal. Okay. So when I say I love blue colored phone, that's my opinion. It is not telling anything about the phone, right? Anything about the phone or the color, like whether blue color is good thing for a phone to have. It's my person. Someone can, maybe for other blue color is not a good color, right? Some may say, okay, I love black color. I love something. So this is very, very personal. So opinion are personal interpretation of the sentiment. In contrast, sentiment is more towards the societal perspective. It is still personal belief, personal expression, but it is more aligned towards the societal expression. Okay? So as a society, if a camera has good camera, right? So most of the people will say that it has a great camera. That is a standard, like some societal influence is there. But when I say I love blue colored phone, that is very, very personal interpretation. Is the difference clear? Sentiments slightly inclined towards societal expression. What society will think about this particular entity. So the entity is definitely camera here and phone here, right? That's the entity or the target here.
Sir?
Yes.
So suppose in the second one, I said that the phone has a very good color. So will that become a sentiment or stay as an opinion?
No, again, that will remain an opinion, right? So there is a very fine boundary. So color and phone, what is the relationship between color and phone? A phone is generally defined with respect to its features, right? its features. Like अगर कोई फोन अच्छा है तो उसके लिए कैमरा अच्छा होगा, बैटरी अच्छी होगी, डिस्प्ले अच्छा होगा, like some specific property which defines a phone. Color is a secondary attribute, and this color is again very personal opinion. The color of this phone is good, right? That's very vague. I cannot like, it's possible that मेरे लिए वो particular color, blue color या red color, whatever the color of that phone, may not be that great. Still the phone is very good. Very fine boundary.
Okay.
Opinion is very, very personal interpretation. Very, very personal interpretation. And sentiment, you can think everything else. So in that term, I can further argue that you can say that the sentiment is a slightly bigger class and opinion is a personal interpretation of that thing. Okay.
So
What is,
maybe we can-
what is the sentiment towards Tesla? What is the sentiment towards BJP? What is the sentiment towards Congress in election, right? That these are the statements we make. So like, society क्या सोच रही है उस particular topic in general sense, right? That comes under the sentiment. But opinion, I don't care. Okay, look at the next two examples. I'm coming to you. Okay? Look at the next two examples. Now, based on this definition, what do you think about the third example? What is this? The third statement, I'm concerned about the current state of the economy. Is it opinion? Is it sentiment? Anyone? Anyone for the opinion for the third sentence?
It looks like an opinion because they will share the same statement among the society. But since it's I am concerned, it's slightly confusing.
So you can see that, especially look at the fourth statement. I think the economy is not doing well. It's my personal interpretation. हो सकता है इकोनॉमी अच्छी चल रही हो, but मैं उसे गलत देख रहा हूँ. Right? I think the economy is not. It's my interpretation. So fourth is the opinion. Right? This is opinion. However, the third sentence, I'm concerned about the current state of the economy. I'm still concerned, right? And this concern is suggesting that the current state of the economy has some societal aspect, like some societal concern associated with this state, right? So this is slightly towards, for me, this is slightly towards the societal view of the current state of the economy. So this is sentiment for me. And the fourth one is definitely opinion. Fourth one is definitely opinion. So third one, we can further argue, but for me, it is a sentiment. What do you guys say? I cannot read chat, so if you have anything to
So
say,
the third
please say.
one, like it's still very confusing because it is in a way just a rephrasing of the fourth one only, right?
Yes, third one looks like sentiment because as we can say, like someone is looking at different data and they are concerned about the economy.
Yeah.
Someone is looking at different data and they will be like hopeful. So I think it looks like a sentiment.
Absolutely. For the third one, that's the point. So concerned people will share the same thought, right? So concerned, how do you know that something, you're concerned with something, right? You get to know something about the current state of the economy, right? And this will suggest that you're getting some data, and these data will be present to n number of different persons, and perhaps they can have the same concern. But the fourth one is definitely, I think that that's not based on any fact. That's not like, this is personal interpretation. I think that something is not good, right? All right. So anyway, so with whether or not this particular sentence is very, very like day and night kind of situation, but the general definition is that sentiment is more towards societal perception of the same thing. Opinion, again, the perception is important, but it's more of a personal interpretation. Okay. So there is a research work called Are They Different? If I'm not wrong, the title is something like that. Are they different? And there's a question, affect, sentiment, and something like that. So there's a bunch of character. And the author is this Munzero. Hope I wrote correct name. So you look at this paper. What these guys suggested that, and which makes sense. Sentiment plus personal interpretation is opinion. Okay. That's how they defined it. And in this paper, they defined affect, they defined feelings, they defined emotion, sentiment, opinion, all these things. So if you want to look more into this, please refer to this paper. Okay. All right, but the general definition is sentiment, more generic or societal view. Opinions are personal interpretations.
Sir, when if in the last sentence the word think would be omitted, I think so, then the sentence would become the economy is not doing well. In that case, it would be a sentiment, right?
The economy is, yeah, perhaps like in some sense, yeah, that can be sentiment. If you can remove this, I think. Yeah, perhaps. So that's what the problem is. In some situation, even the single sentence may not be enough for you. We are picking this sentence standalone. Let's say there are n number of different preceding sentences are all there. But those sentences as discourse, as context will help you finding whether it's a sentiment or an opinion. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So as I mentioned in the previous one, so the n number of different granularity that you can have, that different level you can have this sentiment. Yeah, still here. So for this sentence, if it's not very, very clear, perhaps some world knowledge, some discourse feature will help you here. Fine. So now the sentiment opinion, but consider this difference. Opinions are personal interpretation. I would further say, without loosely speaking, I can say that 90% of the time, even the research domain, people use these both terms interchangeably, opinion and sentiment, definitely. Okay, 90%, even more than that. So if you don't know, if there is some conflict, it's not harming you. That's the point. But they have different definition technically. All right, so now we'll move to another concept, which is emotion that someone mentioned. So now emotion is slightly different. And emotion actually is associated with your psychological state of the mind. What humans are thinking, and it may not be thinking always. What is current state of his mood? That's the emotion analysis, right? And when I say this, let's say this example. I have a statement, just died from laughter after seeing that. So this statement suggests that the person who is writing is in a joyful mood. Right? The mood of the person is joy. Similarly, the other statement still salty about the fire element at 2 mm. So this conveys a fearful psychological state of the person. Right? So the person who is feeling some sort of fear in his mind. So what is the psychological state of the human mind is actually emotion. Okay. And there are n number of different emotions. So sentiment is only positive, negative, neutral in general, but emotions have much more further classification because this analysis is coming from psychology, right? It's the human study of the human mind. So there you have n number of different terms. And very one famous model is called emotion, Ekman's model, and there are n number of others. So Picard's model is there, then Plutchik emotion wheel, which I'll show in the next. This is a Plutchik emotion. There are a number of other further classification. But the most fundamental, you can see that this Paul Ekman defined these 6 emotions as basic human emotions, right? And later on, he also added contempt into this, right? So there's another addition later on. But standard, where is this? This 6 basic emotion a human can have on a very high level. So anger, joy, disgust, fear, surprise, and sadness. And you can see that anger, disgust, fear, and sadness belong to the negative sentiment class. And joy and surprise, joy is definitely positive. Surprise can be both, but it's most likely to be on the positive side. Okay. So sentiment is positive, negative, and neutral. That's no sentiment. And sorry. And within this positive, we have joy and surprise. And here anger is there, disgust is there, sadness is there, and fear is there. These are the 4 standard. Later on, like in the same time, these psycholinguistic, they actually define different emotions. So Polchak defined 8 standard emotions. So he added anticipation and trust as well, right? And he also further gave the intensity of these emotions, right? And the mixture of these emotions. So whatever at the center of this particular wheel, this is called Plutchik wheel of emotion. So that has the very high intensity emotion, very high. As you go outside this, the intensity of that emotion is becoming weaker and weaker. Okay? And you can have that, like there are few emotions which are in between 2 things. Like let's say this is a love, right? So love is a combination of emotion, joy and trust. So you can have emotional love only when you have trust on someone and we are feeling good about that. So then you can love. So that's the definition according to this project emotion. Okay. I hope you understood this emotion. Now, there's a very clear-cut difference between, or like very good differentiation between sentiment and emotion. Right? Emotion is very, very time specific. That means it changes very frequently. It can change. Okay? It can change. Currently, I'm happy. Suddenly something happened, my emotion can change, right? Suddenly किसी ने like surprise कर दिया, तो I might go into fear case. Suddenly something happened, I become angry. So the emotion is very, very temporal, very temporal. Within few seconds, your emotion can change within few seconds. But sentiment, you cannot change sentiment every few seconds, right? तुमने अभी बोला I love blue color fort, within half an hour you cannot say that I don't love blue color fort, right? So sentiment is slightly persistent, it is persistent. However, emotion is very, very temporal. Okay. Other thing is that for sentiment, you need some target. You always have to have sentiment with respect to something. But for emotion, there's no guarantee. मैं रात में सोया हैप्पी मूड में, सुबह उठा मूड खराब है, आई एम वेरी सैड, आई एम वेरी लाइक something feeling disgust or something like that, right? And there's no reason for that. I'm just feeling like down today, nothing. So the emotion can be without target, without any like impulse, without any trigger. That also possible. Okay, so these are different variations of emotions that you can have. One more classification model, like emotion model, is this VAD model, which is Russell and Mehrabian's work. And this VAD is nothing but valence, arousal, and dominance. Right? And valence is that it defines the situation as pleasant and non-pleasant, or more like very highly, you can say the positive situation and negative situation. What is the positive? So joy can be used in it's a pleasant scenario, right? And anger is an unpleasant scenario. So that's the valence. Arousal is that within that valence, what is the intensity? What is the degree of that valence? If someone is having joy, what is the intensity of that joy? Right? The third is called dominance. And dominance actually defines that whatever current emotional state you have, whether or not you have control over that situation, that emotional state. So that is defined by dominance. Okay. Let me give you this example, 3 examples. So if the statement is that I am thrilled with the price, so this is very exciting case, right? I am thrilled with the price. So that's why on a scale of 0 to 5, right? All these values. So valence is 4.4. That means the pleasant scenario is very high because he's happy, he or she is happy. Arousal is again 4.4 because the word is thrill. He's very, very happy about that thing. And finally, sometimes when the intensity is too high for something, you tend to lose control over your emotion. So I'm thrilled with the price. Perhaps the control that he or she needs to have is very, very poor in that sense. So the dominance of the emotion is much more on the human's mind. So that is defined by 4.0 as a dominance. Okay. Similarly, you can look at this example. I shivered as I walked toward the pale man, blank eyes, wondering what they are staring at, right? So this is a very unpleasant scenario. So you get 1.2 as a valence. It has very fierce situation, and the arousal is 3.0. That means the person is expressing or feeling fear in a very moderate kind of way, right? And finally, dominance, the current state of the human mind is in controlled state. So the emotion is not overwhelming the human mind. So that's the dominance. Okay. Again, the same definition you can have with respect to this cube, where you can see that this is valence, this is arousal, and this is dominant. And what are the relationship among these 6 different basic human emotions, basic human expression as per Ekman, with respect to this dominance arousal. Okay. Is there any question?
So just to clarify, so the different values in valence is just for different emotions. There is no any other association.
There is no. So these are kind of a continuous value, right? So there's no categorical classification. What is anger and what is disgust? No. So just 0 to 5. If the situation is unpleasant, the value will be lesser. And again, these values are not defined. It's just you can always normalize this value. In the paper, they define it like this. The data set that I'm using this examples from, they're taking examples from, they define this valence, arousal, and dominance as 0 to 5 range. It can have any range. But the point is that whatever range you have, so there will be 2 polar side of that range. One is pleasant scenario, another is unpleasant scenario. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Any other question? Fine. So these are the standard definitions of sentiment or emotion in particular, and certain bit of other sub problem that we discuss. Now we'll move on to the how to do this sentiment classification respectively. And as you can see that emotion analysis or sentiment analysis, both of these problems are kind of in general, they are classification problem, right? So whatever problem or model we will going to discuss next or the next classes, so they will definitely can be applied to emotion, they can be applied to sentiment. So the model wise, there will be no different per se. You can always utilize emotion set classification model for and sentiment classification model for emotion classification in a general sense, right? So the only thing you have to be aware of that, what kind of problem these tasks or this the problem you have, they are actually trying to solve. Okay? Remember, we talked about generation problem, sequence labeling problem, and the classification problem in the last lecture. Okay? So if you identify that the paradigm is same, you can always utilize the same model for this. Fine. So now we'll see this sentiment classification, and now we'll be more towards the how to actually do this solution, how to find the solution for this sentiment classification, and what other papers, the standard papers have addressed this, they address this problem. So As I mentioned, sentiment classification is a document which it can be expressed by a particular document. What is the expression in that document? And in general, we don't consider holder, entity, and time the standard form. Entity is still in different version. We will include the entity just after some times, but holder and time, we can generally ignore them, right? And why time is not very crucial now is that whenever a document is given to you, you know at what time this document was written, right? More general. So these holder and time are more specific towards the application point. Anyway, so with respect to text classification, so what you have to find is that you have to have some d-dimensional representation of the sentence or whatever document, and you need to find F, which will classify your document to C classes. It is very similar to the classification problem that we saw in the last lecture. Now, how this particular sentiment classification is different from the classical text classification models, right? So where you have to classify whether a document belongs to cricket class and other class and other class. Here, the presence of some keywords are important, right? And the document classification, some generic word, cricket, such in bad pitch, they are important for that. But for the sentiment classification, the words which are mostly adjectives or adverbs, or sometimes some nouns and verb as well, they actually define the keywords. They are the important feature for sentiment classification. For document classification, any specific topic related verb, any named entity kind of thing is important in document classification. But in sentiment, you need to know the adjectives, more likely the adjective, adverbs, and these kind of things. Okay, so this is the dissimilarity. Now, looking at this example, as a human, we know that this particular concerned word is the most important word if I have to tag this as a negative. If I have to tag, that's the major point. Now, how this model will understand that this concerned word is a negative oriented word, then only it can easily classify the entire sentence as negative. For that, we normally utilize this sentiment lexicons. Okay? And this sentiment lexicon is nothing but a dictionary or a kind of vocabulary kind of, which has a word and some sentiment oriented information. So it may be like it can be something like the good, and this is positive, or in some case other thing, good, okay, positive on the scale of 0 to 1, it's 0.7, something like that. So this kind of information you know from this sentiment lexicons, and this is the most important resource you can have for sentiment analysis when we discuss about the classical machine learning paradigm before deep learning stuffs. Okay, so sentiment lexicon definitely helps you a lot, but creating these lexicons is not easy. Creating these lexicons is not easy. That's one point. Even if you can create this lexicon, there is still some concern, right? Only the presence of these words will not always help you. For example, if I know that there is some lexicon L, and in this lexicon, concerned is a negative word, right? Concerned is negative. I know that, right? In that scenario, this particular sentence is very, very easy to classify as negative. But just imagine you have a sentence, I am not concerned about the current state of the economy. Right? Let's say that. So you have added a negative term, not at the before concern. Now, if you take the similar approach, you got to know that this concern is a negative scenario. Now, knowing only this will not help you. You also have to consider the negation of the negative, right? So in this case, perhaps you will not say that concern is, you will say that concern is negative, and a negation of the negative, perhaps we will make it positive, but not always. Okay. Why? If I say it's not bad, what does it mean? It's not bad. This phone is not bad. Does it mean it's good? Or does it mean it's bad, still bad? Or does it mean it's not, like, what does it mean by not terrible? Right? Things are not terrible. So there are different scenarios where you can find that only mapping this sentiment lexicon will not help. You have to do something more on that. But definitely this sentiment lexicon, the resource, is the most crucial resource, informative resource you can have for sentiment analysis, and similar for the emotion classification. We do have lexicons for emotion labels as well. Okay, so you have to realize these resources. Okay, so as at present, there are n number of different lexicons are available, and some of them are here. Right? As you can see that, as I mentioned, like sentiment is just kind of a dictionary. So this kind of information you can expect in this different lexicon. So all these 4 lexicons, they are actually manually annotated. A person sat down, and for every word that are there in this lexicon, they themselves said whether this word is a positive, this word is negative, or like weak positive and weak negative, something like that. So Harvard General Inquiry, that's perhaps the most, like the first lexicon you can have. Bing Liu is perhaps the most widely used these days. NRC Emotion Lexicon and a number of different lexicons are also there. And the lexicons at the bottom of these are automatically curated. Okay, so using some pseudo labeling or using some algorithm, the words has been annotated in this. Okay, and you can see the number of words that are there. So the trend is these lexicons are informative, so you can utilize them as per your need. Further, if you look at more closely on these 2 lexicon, you can see that there are unigrams and there are bigrams, right? So not only these lexicon have good as positive, they also have, let's perhaps not good as negative as well. So they have bigram sentiment labels as well. So this kind of issue you can handle with this. All right, any question? Do visit that, like you can explore these different lexicon. They're actually very, very interesting if you want to do this with sentiment and other related stuff. And as I mentioned, so these lexicons are very, very important before deep learning, but even in the deep learning era, even in the, you try to utilize the information that are there in this lexicon somehow by a fusion mechanism. So there's a deep learning system you have. So maybe in that deep learning, instead of like only feeding your input, you also feed some lexicon, some feature with respect to lexicon features. That's also possible, and then you do go for the classification, and people have done that. Okay, so that's also possible. So it totally depends how you want to exploit these things. Any question?
So I had a small doubt regarding the last topic. That
last topic
valence
as
and arousal one.
Okay, valence. Okay.
Yeah, in this table, so we can see that for the first 2 sentences, the value of arousal is high, but the value of dominance is changing.
Right.
So, but you said that if we have like very high arousal value, then we start to lose control over the emotion, right?
No, not always. So that was with respect to this as well, right? So the valence also has a role to play there. It is not always arousal with dominance. Dominance is like whether you are in control of your emotion or not. You can
So
still like
what does the high value signify in D?
In this, you are not control of the emotion.
Okay.
That means your emotion is dominating you. That's the meaning. If domination is 5, that means your emotion is dominating you, your state of the mind.
Okay.
All right.
And sir, how would we see this, that the emotion is dominating?
So you can look at the again, the context will definitely play a role here, but look at these examples. So it will give you some bit of sense, right? So when this domination will be high, I'm thrilled with the price, right? Can't wait to see you tomorrow, right? So these kind of statement just suggest that your domination, you're not controlling your emotion. So the emotion is dominating you.
Okay, sir.
So in different scenario, okay, as I mentioned, like can't wait to see you tomorrow, can't wait to do this, right? So this kind of thing. All right, so yeah, any other question with respect to whatever we discussed? All right, so I'll quickly go through some of the fundamental sentiment analysis paper, and I don't think I'll have time to cover more on this today, but definitely in the next lecture we'll cover this. But anyway, so this paper, which Turney published in 2002, that's an unsupervised classification technique for sentiment analysis. So this paper was perhaps first paper with respect to sentiment, and like perhaps the famous paper that you can have. Okay, and as the name suggests, this is an unsupervised version, so you don't have any label data for that, right? So whatever technique, whatever algorithm Turney use, this is very heuristic kind of thing or other sign. So anyway, so he defined 3 steps in order to classify a document into whether it's a positive, negative, and something else. So first of all, in the sentence, he identifies the adjective and the adverb phrases, not like adjective, verb, adjective, adverb, verbs, words, rather phrases. Okay. So phrases means the head word of these phrases will be adjective or adverb accordingly. But in order to find phrases, you need to do pause tagging as well. I hope that is clear to you. Anyway, so once identifying different adjectives and adverbs or their associated phrases, he calculated a semantic orientation score of all the phrases with respect to positive and with respect to negative. And this semantic orientation gives you the alignment of these phrases with respect to the positivity of the sentence and negativity of the sentence. Okay. And after that, he just consolidated all these sentiment orientation score and then classify the reviews as whether it's a recommended class or not recommended class. So you can assume that this is the positive class, this is not positive in the sense, positive and negative classes in the sense. So what rules did he apply? Okay, so the first thing is this, he defined these kind of rules. So what he said that if first word is JJ and second word is NS or NNS, and I don't care what the third word is in the phrase, so then this is a recommended class. Or the second rule he applies, if the first word is some sort of adverb, second word is adjective, and the third word is not a noun, then this will perhaps a recommended class. So these kind of these kind of rules he applied on the phrases that he identifies, and based on that he compute a score with respect to semantic orientation and how it defines. So the word that he got with respect to this, he computed this PMI score, which is called point-wise mutual information. Okay, and point-wise mutual information, as I said, it finds the alignment of two words together. Right? So how two words, word one and word two, are aligned with each other. Okay. And in this case, what is done? So the phrase, whatever phrase you have identified with these rules, rule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that rule, the phrase itself is aligned with the word excellent, which is normally termed as a positive class, right? Recommended class. So it finds the alignment of these two words, and it finds the alignment of with respect to poor, and it took the difference between SO, between these two alignments. Okay. And that's the score is the sentiment orientation score. So you can easily see that if PMI for excellent is higher, then definitely SO will be positive, right? Or vice versa. Something. So based on SO, you can say that if SO is positive, then the phrase is most likely to be a positive. Excellent belongs to excellent class. If it is negative, it's most likely to be poor class or the negative class. And that's the decision they take. All right. Now, after this particular paper, this is the unsupervised version. At the almost the same time, in just a span of 1 or 2 months, Pang et al., Pang and Linear Lee, they developed this supervised classification for the same. So the for classification, they use naive-Bayes, the maximum entropy model, and then support vector machine as 3 classifiers. And these classifiers are fed with the features like this. So the n-grams, unigram, and bigrams. What are the pos tag of each word? If there's some negation, so these negation will be added to that, right? And what they did as that, if any negation word is available, then all subsequent following word will be appended like this, right? So let's say W1, W2, W3, and there's this comma, some punctuation mark, and assuming that W0 was some not, some negation. So what changes they did is that they appended not W1, not W2, not W3 till the first punctuation that they receive. Okay, so these feature they utilize, and when they did the experiment, they found that the XVM was the best classifier that they found with accuracy 82.9. So these are very standard papers, but back then this was a big deal, and this got published into ACL. So that's like, back then it was a very big deal to have this kind of thing. All right. Now I'll quickly discuss one more paper and then I'll stop. So this third paper, I'm directly jumping to 2003 from 2020. There are a number of different papers have been proposed in this file, and even like after 2020, a bunch of papers are there. But this paper was perhaps the first paper which started to the sentiment analysis in Twitter. Okay, and the Twitter was different because of the noisy and unstructured text. So there are hashtags, emoticons, and a number of different things. You know all these things. So they did experiment on this, and why it is slightly difficult to do sentiment analysis in Twitter is that you also have these kind of emoticons, which actually tells you whether this is a positive sentiment or not. Similarly, you have these kind of hashtags, which will tell you whether what is the alignment of the sentiment in these things. So in this like coward, traitor, it's very simple, but you may find that the hashtag, which is multiple word hashtags. So good day, best day ever, or something like that, right? Best day ever, all without a space. So this is a one hashtag, but how your system will interpret that this is a positive word, 3 sequence of word in this positive thing. Okay, so these kind of information are necessary to capture. So what this guys Saf and Ternary, again this paper was, one of the author was Ternary. So they first of all, from pre-processing, they did this. They converted URL to some URL. So they don't normalize these user IDs and the URLs just to make sure your model is have very limited amount of vocabulary to learn. And anyway, these UI, user IDs and URL will not have any effect on the sentiment in general, right? So why to consider this? So you can just convert them. And finally, as a feature, they have used this lexical and syntactical features, like all caps. This is demographic feature, this kind of the feature that they're using. Negation is there or not, whether pause tags are there, whether the word is all caps or not, engrams. To test specific character, what are the hashtags, punctuation, elongation, emoticons, sentiment lexicon, as I mentioned earlier, these kind of sentiments as well were used. And finally, SVM classifier was learned back then. Okay, so that's the main crux of this paper. So this was the first paper which was defined, or which proposed this sentiment analysis into it. Okay. All right. Any question? All right. So I think I'm done. I'll continue from here only, because the next problem I want to discuss is this aspect-based sentiment analysis. This is much more fine-grained version of the aspect sentiment analysis. And in recent days, these days, most of the research is happening on this. So I'll discuss more on this in the next class. Okay, but before closing, I do have something to request you. So actually, we are running we have proposal for a workshop in ACL. So I'll just a minute, let me open that. So I request all of you to kindly do this, just vote for us. So this is, let me copy this. So you can find a list of proposals here. So, and if I open this, so please vote for us, and you can see like whatever detail you want to go with. So just name, some affiliation, some position, let's say ACL. And after that, there are a bunch of workshop that proposal are there. So please do that. Please do vote for us. And this proposal is basically on combating online hostile posts, so fake news, hate speeches, and other things in regional languages. So if you go down, the name is Constraint. Okay, so Constraint second workshop on combating online hostile posts. So this has been being organized with LCS2 lab. So I and Dr. Tanmay, and there are some other persons who are out there. So please do vote for this. Okay. And if you can do it now, it would be very, very beneficial for us. So please do it. Yes. Thanks, Amit. You did that. So it's just like a couple of clicks. That's it. And you can also you can vote for other workshop as well if you find them interesting, definitely. All right. So yeah, thanks everyone. If you have anything to add, anything to comment here, please do. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Thanks Akshit. Thanks Avinash, Joykrit. And remember, we'll be having quiz 3 on next Tuesday. So happy holidays. Stay safe. Thanks.